Hey, Brandy.
Hey Karl, how are you?
I'm doing well today. I couldn't be better because I'm talking to you. How
Oh,
was Chicago?
well, it was a little cold, but it was a great relief from the weather we have here in Arizona, so I loved it.
Oh, such problems. Did you find yourself making common comments throughout the day?
Yeah, there were some really amazing groups, and probably one of my biggest takeaways from seeing such a wide range of classifications, but especially the classes I focused on, was really more about the integrity of form responsibility. And I think that, when it comes to however clean your color guard is, if the staging isn't as clean as the choreography that you have, I feel like a lot of times there are groups that they're like, well, the choreography's together, and so I
Yeah.
feel sometimes that I felt myself saying that quite a bit. Like, I felt the color guards, they were really strong and had a really good sense of identity,
Yeah.
which was really great. And especially coming from the region I come from, it was kind of eye opening on how prepared the color guards were and how done they were.
Yeah.
There was only a few of them that weren't, but it really see that caliber of color guard and where they're at this point in the season. There were a few moments I felt that it was kind of hard to find where the focus was for a lot of people and how they transition in and out of those moments. Because a big takeaway for me was, a lot of people think about like the moment, but they don't think about how they got into the moment. And there were like these pauses that would occur right before the moment to where it was like, no, you have to like milk every moment getting into it.
Yeah.
The getting out of it was good. It just seemed like a lot of teams here and there, it was about getting into the moment, not just about it.
In different classes, those types of things are treated slightly differently. But do you think people were not as successful as they thought they maybe should have been or could have been because of that kind of lack of attention to detail?
Yeah, there were a few times that I feel that even the crowd response didn't come for them in moments where I bet, like, as a designer, I sit there and say, this was a design moment for you that you wanted them to clap, but how you got us there didn't lead us to that fulfilled moment.
Yeah.
So I do feel like there are times where within a few programs, not a whole lot, but a few programs that they could use some benefit on understanding how important that
Else
is.
there, did it change as you went up into the classes? Did you find that open class had certain comments that weren't necessarily applicable to the A's or regional A's?
Yeah, I think for the open class groups, one, the production value that is being presented, especially in that region, is really high. And so
Mhm.
I'm sure that the vulnerability for some of them is going to come into the fact that if you don't go into that regional prepared, everyone else is so produced. And
Yeah.
that there were in the open class, there were some finesse moments that need to happen, that it's February and the clock is ticking on some of that where you have to get that finessed moment, that in open class, those blended efforts and how finessed you make them are going to make or break some people in that class.
Yeah. So in the A's and the regional A's, especially, so much of what every judge has to factor hinges on compatibility. And we've talked about, instructors, designers that are sensitive to and considerate of the performer's abilities and sensibilities, not just with choreographic choice, but also with premise of program and things like that. You tend to look more holistically, but of course, we always notice it first in equipment choices. I think that we as a culture are moving away from that. Did you find that much in the region, or did you feel like they were a little bit better by the time we got to week three?
Yeah, I feel like they were better because it is week 3.
Yeah.
Um, but I feel like there were some in the finals program that those kind of fell victim to that a little bit. Kind of became one of those moments where some of the work became a little too ambitious.
Yeah.
So, and especially in SRA and A class, I mean, you have to program for the kids in that class. And I feel that there's, a lot of people that those first time instructors that they try to put everything in the kitchen sink into it. Um, that they kind of fell victim to that.
And there's a little bit of a Goldilocks choice. I mean, you are working towards all those things matching up in April. And so I know there's some strategy to that too, but you can find instances where there's a complete neglect of that consideration. You come from a choreographic background that thinks of the larger scope and context, and it's not just about twirls and steps, which is a conversation we're starting to have right now when we talk about the differences between people that are vocabulary builders versus people that are choreographers, and the wider eye of the choreographic eye, is what gets your work up into upstairs, beyond the downstairs analysis, if you will. But you also recently have taken the step in towards designing the entire space, where you used to have people come in and do this. And when I came to Arizona, and I'm going to talk about last year, my observations from last year, because I haven't seen this year's project. I was so taken back about your abilities and your sensitivity to the space, the full space. A lot of people that come in from a dance background, when they move into staging and they start expanding their effort into space, they still look at it from a studio perspective. It's like when you see those color guards that work only in armories or only in the band room, and they don't get into the gym, and they don't lift their perspective, into a higher space, but also a wider scope. And that is so much a part of what it is we value about what it is we do, that's different from dance theater, musical theater, but also our marching arts cousins. We operate on a smaller scale, which doesn't mean smaller ideas. It means we're able to change quicker, and so we can do rapid fire stuff that on a football field, depending on what the set pieces are and stuff like that, is usually a little harder to make happen. We can create change pretty quickly if it's done right. Now, let me get back to you. Sorry about that. What I loved is that your choreographic approach really seemed to translate into different choices with how you move space. I got a sense that you used qualities that aren't typical approaches. And again, it's not a constant thing, but I found moments where it felt like, oh, if Jose Limon were exploring space, I could see suspend, fall, and recovery. I could see how he, and I'm going to say you, would use that as a method or a device to change a direction. And then the use of indirect pathways, and how there was such a fluidity to the flow that didn't feel like it was this typical picture to picture to picture animation. Animation comes from moving from shape to shape to shape and shape. And usually it's motivated by what twirl you want to see next, and how to get the twirl that's important or the steps that are important in front of the people that need to be able to credit that, which is a huge part of what we do. But ultimately, in the example I just gave, that's an A-class paradigm. And so you expect more from spatial choice and its own sense of music and poetry that can come from the play of space as you progress a little into open. I'm going to give it to you. It can still be very presentational and open, but by the time you get into the world, you're expected to have a voice. It's not, it's 20 points out of your potential 100. And so it should take, 20% of that effort. And I don't always see that. And it's been very frustrating over the last couple of years, coming out of COVID, where we've all had the opportunity to reimagine what it is we do, and then to see very familiar answers come back. And so I was pleasantly surprised when I came to your region last year, and I saw these glimpses of how you treated space differently. And there was such a symbiosis between the performance and the space and your aesthetic and your sensitivity that I thought was really critical. And then me knowing you from our time, in Texas together, and you made that jump kind of on your own, and it was kind of quickly. And I don't know if it was necessity or choice. So I want to hear about how you made that jump and made that important to you. And then more importantly, how'd you find those answers? Was that just hardwired and built into your own personal aesthetic, or did you have the discovery process? And I'm sure that whatever it is, and I don't want to speak for you, although the setup feels like I'm speaking for you a lot, talking about the evolution. And if you can compare I can look at certain designers. There's one I'm thinking of where I saw, in '08, I saw the shadow of what this was going to be in '09. And I saw how that progressed in 10. And it's created this huge identity for this one designer I'm thinking of right here that now has such a distinctive look. But even when the look wasn't distinctive, I saw the building blocks that carried me to the evolutionary process that got that designer to where that designer is now. Can you talk to me about your journey into the big spatial design and connecting that into your choreography?
Well, thank you for all of that. Um, I will say that when I first started, I feel like it took me a little bit, like a little while, that I didn't necessarily think that I was enough to be able to do more, than just the choreographic stuff, and to move into, um, you know, stepping into or jumping into the pool of designing it myself. And so I had some amazing, amazing mentors along the way, and have a group of people here locally that we continue to push each other on a daily basis on not what can be the most life changing, but the most life changing for us. And I think with my dance background and going to school for, as a dance performance major, I really feel like I finally found my home and my voice in some of those areas. And of course, color guard was always my place. That was my home. And so I feel like I've kind of been a fan for a very long time and really wanted to just take a leap of faith in myself. A really good, amazing friend of mine, Rob Jett, always told me I was enough. And I wanted to try my hand at being enough. But to me, I just was always so inspired by how things move and how things piece together. It took a huge leap of faith within myself. Was scary at times. And of course, I felt more confident, yes, yet at the same time, still nervous enough to continue to challenge myself as much as I could,
Yeah.
to put everything into it. But I'm also surrounded by a lot of amazing people on my staff that we help lift each other up to be able to get there. So I've had a lot of support along the way, and it matters who you surround yourself with.
Right. Hey, I do want to share a part of the conversation we had at the advisory board. Someone asked me about, how design seems to be diminished through this time. And there's several answers to that. But one of them is that we don't facilitate the design curiosity of our students. We kind of cater to the movement and the equipment stuff, and because that's what they feel, if they're in their bodies, it's the physicality of that they really like. And it's not always a spatial relationship or how space is treated and what their orientation is, because that's usually talked about only in technical terms and within the cleaning process. So it doesn't sound exciting. It sounds like a necessary evil. And so I have been trying to encourage anyone that sees themselves as a designer, because I think there's, in the same way that we distinguish between vocabulary builders and choreographers, I think there are space planners, that facilitate a presentational approach. And then I think there are designers that have a wider range. That being said, I have urged designers to expose their process just like they do with equipment. And as they work inside the gym, to talk to the students about, hey, I'm making this decision this way, and this might be why. And maybe it's great, maybe it's not great, but let's try this. Okay, now let's try this. And then even in that mistakes, the rewriting, the editing, being able to go, this is what I can care about it. Now, I know, especially if you're working through workshop and you work in real time, that you don't always have the time to do that, especially when you're, like you said, you go into the Midwest and you see how prepared they are, and we on the West Coast operate at a very different pace, and we're never ready to march. And that's just kind of how we've always done it. But have you been able to kind of share a little bit of that with your students, with your design process? Because I think you're a really good model, and where you are in your own point of development, where I can only project myself into your situation, so I can't speak for you, but you should be really excited about your viewpoint, and you're at the perfect time to be able to share that excitement and to feed what I hope is the next designer's curiosity that's in your group. Can you speak to that a little bit?
I can. So my boss here, and at Arizona State University, because Phoenix is the ASU Winter Guard. And one of the big things in his push, because I worked for him in Texas, him and his wife, and then now I work for them here, where the big push is I'm teaching teachers. When you teach college marching band and you teach college color guard or winter guard, you're teaching teachers. And so I would be doing them an injustice if I didn't try to teach them along the way in the process and make them involved in the process. And I think that that's what's really kind of special. And I do my best, but you're right. Sometimes we get in the weeds. And so we have to keep pushing, but I feel like, knowing the sheets, and I did a thing here locally in the circuit, because I'm also on the board, where I had all the sheets laminated, with the Bloom words, and like in a little ringer binder thing, and gave them a dry erase marker, and was like, really understand and know those sheets and teach off of those sheets and make sure that the students know those, because there's some couple of sayings that we have during rehearsal where I'll say something and everyone will go, it's on the sheets. And it's important that they know what that is, because otherwise I'm not doing them. I'm just sending them out in the world to be mimic teachers. And I know that I was a mimic teacher when I first started, and it wasn't until a group of people brought me in and said, here's how to be an educator of the art that we have that's called color guard, because there is no class at a college level that we can take for that. So you have to find those ways. And I'm fortunate enough to have an amazing director of bands here who is really big on the member experience and the education that they're getting. And it's not do it again, do it again, do it again. It's why, how, and really understanding the process rather than just the outcome.
Yeah. Oh, that's brilliant. I love that. So I'm going to ask you the hard question, because when we have this conversation, inevitably somebody will follow up with me and go, yeah, but what about your creative intuition? So do you feel like it's somehow limited or got in the way of your ability to work in real time and to express yourself creatively when you had this whole analytical filter through the sheet at the same time? Or did you trade the times and work, experiment, workshop, and then come back to it? Or did you feel like that was a constant in your process?
I feel like it evolves, because just like with everything else, it's, to me, the show is a living, breathing thing at all times.
Good.
Because it as the students get better and stronger at what they do, then you have to evolve. So I feel like I'm really good at working in the moment, and then making sure that as I watch something, how am I applying the sheet to what I just did through the workshop process? So we do a lot of workshopping an idea. There's some that made it onto the floor and some that are going to be in the can for later. And so I feel like I'm better when I'm in the moment than trying to pre-plan and make it something and forcing something into it, if you will.
Yeah.
I love the organic nature of it whenever you do that. But I like being in that moment. You know what I mean? It's kind of scary at times because you don't know where it's going to lead you, but it has led us to some really great places, especially.
We certainly appreciate all your time and your effort going into Chicago for us for week 3. I know they were super happy to see you there. The staff was excited, and then I know the units got a lot out of it also. So thank you for making that effort and doing that for us.
Well, thank you guys so much for thinking of me. I'm blessed to be a part of the process. Anywhere I can help, that's where I'm going to be.
That's great. I appreciate it, Brandy. You have a good one. All right.
All right. Thank you.